So for our last presentation today, we have my colleague Chris Collins, who will be sharing some of his recent work that's really focused on better understanding the employee experience. So just a quick background on Chris. He's a professor of human resource studies and also our director of graduate studies here in the ILR school. He earned his PhD in organizational behavior and human resources from the Robert H. Smith School of Business at the University of Maryland. Chris is a leading expert in the areas of strategic human resource management, the role of HR practices and leadership in driving employee engagement, and the role of HR in driving firm innovation and knowledge creation. His research on these topics has been published extensively in our field's top journals. Chris also engages regularly with the HR practice community through his executive education teaching and consulting, and he is also the former director of CAHRS and a current member of our CAHRS advisory board. He's also a member of the Academy of Management, Strategic Management Society, and the Society for Human Resource Management. So with that, Chris, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. So let me just start. So I'm going to talk about this topic of the employee experience. So maybe let me engage you all a little bit. So if you would, in the chat function, just type in some thoughts that you have in terms of when you think about the employee experience, the context of your organization, what are some of the themes, words, HR practices that come to mind when you think about the employee experience? I'm a pretty patient guy, so I can wait while you guys type. In the meantime, I will pull up my deck so I can share that with you guys.
It says, I'm getting a message here that the chat is disabled.
All right. So skip that. We'll just move on.
But you
So
can throw, if you want, you can throw them in the Q&A and I can...
No, that's all right.
Put them out.
So what I was hoping to start hearing from some of you is a lot of different ideas of where your companies or where you as employees, whereas you as leaders, managers are thinking about the employee experience. And it's pretty broad when we think about what might be part of this experience that employees have as employees in your organization. So you might think of things like the feedback that they get from their manager or supervisor. It might be the learning programs or training programs they participate in, the collaborative environment they work in, which we've heard from this last presentation. It might be things like the workstation that they work at or the work tools they have. Could be the childcare services you provide them. It could be coaching they get or leadership support, the retirement program they're signed up for, health and wellness programs they're engaged in. What we know is employees experience work in lots of different ways. And so when we think about the totality of what constitutes the employee experience, it's pretty broad. And so when I ask that question, and this is a topic, honestly, we started down this path of the employee experience about maybe 6.5 years ago. We did a few working groups on the topic of design thinking and consumer-driven HR, where we really talked about how companies were switching to think about employees really as consumers of a workplace environment. And so they often come in to work thinking about, what am I getting out of my job? What have I experienced today? What's been my experience with this company? And as the world continues to evolve, as people have greater and greater access to information, we know that employees more frequently than ever compare their experience at work, both to their own expectations, but also to their perceptions of what those experiences might be elsewhere. And so even before the pandemic, I think we have lots of data to suggest that the great resignation started happening multiple years before the pandemic, that the pandemic, at least the early months of the pandemic, stopped the great resignation because people were afraid to leave their jobs if they still had one. And certainly as the economy picked up in the last 1.5 years or so, we saw that great resignation explode again. But the turnover rates that companies were experiencing prior to the pandemic were the highest they'd been in about 15 years. So we'd really seen a big increase in turnover and employees leaving their employer. And so when I think about this idea of the employee experience, where I really take it from is that early work on the customer experience and how we translated many of the tools from that work in marketing and work in design thinking to the HR function, or really this idea of understanding the systemic ways that we shape employees' emotional connections, their affiliations with their organization. And so when I define this idea of employee experience, I really think about it as the combination of policies, practices, tools, interactions, systems, actions that impact employees and really shape their emotional connection to us as employers. And so when I think about, well, what does that mean for us as a function? I think what it really does is force us to focus on and recognize that individuals have lots of choice when it comes to work, and they've got a lot of expectations around what they expect from that workplace. And again, being an older Gen Xer, right, when I first entered the workplace, I don't think it was that different. I think I came in with expectations of what I thought a job would be or how I wanted a company to treat me. I think often we put up or tolerated with more because we didn't know what other options existed. But I certainly think in today's world where it's so much easier to see what's happening elsewhere, to see reviews, hear from friends, see social media outlets talking about the experiences people are having at other workplaces, it really has created an environment where employees are acting much more like customers. So they know they have choice, they've got clear expectations, and across generations, this is not just a newer generations phenomena. They're really questioning whether they're getting what they want out of their workplace. And so the idea that we want to focus on creating a place that meets their expectations, creates the experiences that make people really feel like they've got a great place to work, really certainly helps us with that attraction and attention when it comes to the scarce talent we're trying to attract to our companies. It certainly helps them as they constantly reflect on how is my job relative to what that job might look like elsewhere. But I think it also is going to play a role in this increasing space around employee activism. So you see the companies that are most often seeing employee activism at this point, whether that's Starbucks, REI, these are places that in their categories, right, in their industry, are often seen as leaders in terms of HR practices or what they do and how they treat employees. But I think the talent they've attracted has really high expectations of what they want work to be. So it might put even more pressure on great companies to really continuously think about have they created the right work environment, the right experiences, where people aren't just attracted and want to continue to work for you, but does it also help to tamp down some of those possible moves towards employee activism? To me, I think it's also this approach is a philosophy that really helps us to think about the key touch points that really impact our employees. I think it's also for HR, it's a mindset shift. And I guess I've been around HR long enough. I'm not quite as grizzled as Kevin Cox is. He's got a few years on me, but we're pretty close. And so I think I've seen the evolution of HR in the last decade, 2 decades, really move more and more towards that idea of cost and control, and really think about one size fits all efficiencies. And where I really think we need to get back to is a little bit more focused on the outcomes we're trying to drive rather than the costs we're trying to maintain, and really think more about re-engaging and re-involvement of employees in some of our decisions that we make as a function. Clearly, the research we've done suggests that this employee experience is a key driver of engagement. It's not engagement. So when I think about all of the recent literature in the popular press I've read on the employee experience, I see most of the consultants treating the employee experience as employee engagement, but on crack or on some kind of performance enhancing drug. They treat it as the next level of doing something. I think that's a totally false premise. I think what the employee experience is all those things that we can do that drive employee engagement, that drive that affiliation to that organization, that really build the emotional attachment to our organizations. And the last thing I'll say about this is really when I think about this employee experience, if you go back to that last slide, what all those words I had up there, what it really tells us is that this notion of the employee experience is really complex. And so what I wanted to do is really distill, when I was putting this presentation together, forced me to really think again about, what is the employee experience, and is there some framework that we might have to think about the different ways, the different levels at which we impact the employee experience. And this is a work in progress. I'll state that up front. But to me, at least from my synthesis of all the conversations I've had with companies and focus groups in one-on-one interviews, is the topmost level. When I think of the employee experience, I think what we can think of it as is really episodic touch points. It's things that we do as organizations that employees don't use all the time. So if I'm getting ready to have my first child, I might start to look at childcare benefits or other healthcare benefits, or extending healthcare to a broader family. As I get close to retirement, I might look at more opportunities to engage in activities the company set up around retirement. Or as I start to think about my personal health around the holidays and losing weight, do I go and look on the employee health and wellness site and see what the company is doing in terms of weight loss or exercise programs, right? So it's things that happen not every day, not even every week, but probably at different stages in life. And so there's times when we impact employees and they really feel that emotional connection or feel a greater level of support or investment in our company because of those episodic things we do. The second way that I really think this employee experience happens is what I've been calling recently reflection touch points. So these to me are more career oriented and really to me happen in some bundle of time, whether that's 8 months, 12 months, 16 months, 18 months, where people sit back and reflect on how their job is going. Am I getting out of the company what I wanted? Am I making progress in my job? Am I making progress in my career? Do I see myself growing? So there's times where I step back and reflect not on a specific activity, but really reflection on how things are moving in my career and my time in this organization. And then the third level that I see is really the day-to-day touch points. So these are the things that impact me. It's not every day, it's certainly weekly. So it might be, again, the desk that I sit at, and there's this wobbly chair that I sit on. I think about the first day I came to my office at ILR 20-some years ago, and my old computer that was sitting on a board across two seahorses that were, or construction horses that were really there set up as my desk. I'm like, how do I work in a place like this, right? So those are the things that impact you every day. The colleagues you work with, your boss, the lack of pens in the desk drawer to do writing with, or my old computer, right? It's the day-to-day touch points. And I've intentionally, if you see this visually, really think about these as increasing in impact in employees, right? The episodic touch points, because they don't happen with great frequency, probably have the least impact in terms of how people feel about their organization at any one point in time. The reflection touch points, because they're bigger, potentially more meaningful in terms of how people are evaluating themselves, their lives, their careers, probably more importantly. And I think what may swamp both of them is just how they experience work on a day-to-day basis. And so I'm going to dig into each of the three of these a little bit more. So again, when I think about the episodic touch points, I think about it as, am I getting the organizational support that I need when I need it at different points in life? And it could be described as the personal well-being touch point. So when there's been some change in my life, some change in my family, some change in my age group, whatever it might be. These are times where I might reach out to the organization for help, for services, for support from them. To me, this is the area where we as a function are probably, particularly for all the companies I've talked to, light years ahead in terms of having much of this buttoned down, that we've often been working at these programs for long periods of time. When we think about retirement, when we think about family programs or health programs, we've got lots of smart people who have created really smart programs that really can help employees at different points in time. This is also the level of employee experience where I think we most closely control or impact the way employees experience this. When I think about where we fail at this level, most often we fail in a few ways. And one of those is employees being able to find the right program when they need it. So that something happens, or they want to stop smoking, or they want to eat healthier, or they want to think about their retirement more seriously, they often have trouble finding on our website because we've got so many things that we're doing. Our search capabilities on those websites are often pretty limited, that it's actually a frustrating experience often for those employees to go find what they need when they need it. And again, as we've kind of changed the HR function delivery to be more self-service, there's fewer HR generalists running around for them to have those conversations with. So I think often one of the points where these become frustrating rather than engaging is because they can't find the things that they need. I think the second thing that often is frustrating to them is often these programs are fairly rigid, right? They're designed to be kind of one size fits all, or they're really designed to be efficient in delivery. So that's really not always personalized, not always the right fit to what I'm doing. I think the other failure point is often employees sometimes don't even remember that they got the value out of these programs. And so they actually become almost a zero impact when people think about how much do I value work at this company, because they forget about these things because they happen so episodically. So if I were to tell companies, like, how do we really get better in this space to have more impact on employee engagement, really create stronger affiliation and attachment to the company, the first area I'd really spend my time is really around predictive push communications. And as we know, a lot of the programs we have really are fit for people at different points in life, different points of the year. So can we use predictive data to send out tailored communications to employees, right? Much like Amazon can tell me when I need to order more toilet paper or more razors or more shaving cream, can't we be a little bit better at knowing the different stage of life our employees are in and sending them some push communications around particular programs that might be the best fit for them? I think we can also think a little bit about how to create some nuance in these programs, really thinking about using design thinking to identify different personas, having some greater flexibility in the programs we create in this space, so that, we don't certainly want to customize every single delivery to each individual, but we could do this to broader groups so they feel a little bit more tailored. I think we can also spend a little bit more time, whether that's internally or bringing in some external help, just to make this bundle of information easier to find, more searchable, easier to understand in plain language what the program's for, who it's for, how to use it, how to enroll, right? Just making the process of engaging in these activities easier. And then I think where we also have not done a great job as companies is really tooting our own horns a little bit and reminding employees how many people have benefited from these different activities that we've done, and really reinforcing that these are valuable and that many employees have taken advantage of them, have a little branding and communications that help people understand the value of these activities. So again, a lot of this is around making it easier to spot, but it's also reminding employees that we do these things and how much it's impacted the lives of people in the company. The second level, again, I talked about was this idea of reflection touch points. So to me, again, this is, am I getting what I want out of my job and out of my career at this organization? And again, to me, this probably varies by person. I'm probably an outlier in that I don't think about this very often, but I think the average person probably doesn't reflect on, am I getting out of my job what I want every day? This is probably monthly, periodically, as you come up against quarterly or half-year performance reviews. As you get those reviews, people step back and ask those questions of, am I really getting back from this company what I'm putting into it? So, they might be asking things around, is this work challenging? Am I doing what I love to do? Have I acquired new skills or capabilities this year? Am I making progress toward my long-term personal career goals? What did I actually do this year? And was it meaningful work? So, I don't think those are questions we ask again with great regularity, but certainly multiple times a year and certainly different time points of the year, we're probably asking that. Again, I think there are many aspects, much like the top layer. I think there's many aspects of HR systems and practices that we've put in place as organizations that impact people's perceptions of how they feel about the company and these reflection touch points that they have. But importantly, I think we also have to acknowledge that these reflection touch points are also impacted by groups outside of the function. So our line leaders, how we're doing as a business, people's perceptions, what the external marketplace looks like. And so one of the key things that I think in terms of failure points is, when I think about why we often don't have great feelings from our employees in terms of their career opportunities, their personal development, is what I'd call the final mile program delivery, that we may have created a great career ladders, we might have created great career opportunities, but often that fails at the last level when they're having that conversation with their HR business partner, or they're having that conversation with their line leader. So I think one of the places we certainly have to get better is really thinking through, for all these reflection points, have we created the opportunities? Have we really created the infrastructure that makes that last mile of delivery feel better for employees? I think part of the issue here is that often investments that we make can sometimes feel like more work disguised as an investment. So, hey, I'm putting you on this extra project. I'm giving you this extra opportunity for more work. I'm giving you a second assignment or a third assignment. Putting on you on this short-term project on top of the work you've already done. I think one of the things that we've learned a lot in the last 3 years is that some of the turnover that's happened is because people thought that the investments we were making in them actually was just adding more to their plate, and they felt burned out. So I think we have to think about, if we're going to create more opportunities for growth and learning, how do we do it in a way that makes it feel balanced and not just more work? I think it's also hard for employees to assess this in a rapidly changing world. So, as the great resignation was happening, I think a lot of people started questioning whether they should also jump ship, and if they're being treated as well as they should be. And again, I think they're constantly hit with more and more information around what others are doing and getting. So I think it's, one of the failure points is, I think some of this is happening more quickly or more often than it used to. And so people are a little confused and in their own personal reflections. And again, part of it is just that people's expectations differ wildly. And so to deal with some of those failure points, I think where we need to invest, certainly for me, one of the greatest investments companies can make is more predictive analytics in terms of career development, and whether that's better understanding of how our jobs are going to be changing given new markets we're moving into, or changes in our industry. What new skills do they need to build? What new capabilities do they need to build if they're going to continue to grow with us? Whether that's the AI or other HR programs or technologies helping to surf through the organization and find those people that have the potential to grow, help them understand what skills to build, how to build them. Are those internal trainings, external trainings? So really using data and predictive analytics more to help people understand how to grow so that they can be successful. As the students mentioned in their research, I think a big takeaway for me is really training and building capabilities in managers to be coaches. So that they're having more of these conversations where they can have powerful, reflective conversations about career opportunities, in-job growth opportunities, in-job learning opportunities with their employees to help them think about improving not just current performance, but really making themselves ready for other opportunities inside the organization. And really investing in that management training is super important. I think we also have to get much better at integration across silos, that the data that's still trapped in different departments, solutions that have to come from multiple HR functions or COEs working together, or those COEs working better with HR business partners to deliver solutions, really important. I think this is where we also have to depend more on employees, helping us to think about possible solutions to some of these issues, really having them help us understand what's most frustrating, but also having them generate some ideas for solutions. All right, the last of the three, so the day-to-day touch points. And so, just as a thought experiment, I typed a whole bunch of different search words into Google around the employee experience. How do people feel about their employer, employee feelings about work, images related to those? And for every one of the images I got that looked like this, right? Employees happy, celebrating, excited about something that they're working on. I tended to see 2 or 3 that looked like this, right? Which I think tells us a lot about how people are feeling about work right now, which is, I love that each of the images says something completely different to me, right? There's disdain, there's frustration, there's anger, there's dismay, all included in all these photos. And so I think just that quick thought exercise around, how do people picture work tells us a lot about what that day-to-day experience of work can be. And so, when I think about the day-to-day touch points, it's really a question of what's it like here to work every day? And think of this as the daily frustrations that add up that really impact how employees are feeling about your company. And those frustrations can come from certainly their interactions with HR stuff. How hard is it to fill out forms? How hard was it to sign up for these benefits? What were the hoops I had to jump through to do my own self-assessment on the performance dialogues for this year? But certainly that day-to-day experience is equally or probably more likely impacted by the way their leaders behave, the way their leaders treat them and interact with them, how their colleagues are showing up at work and their ability to get work done with them or through them. Certainly it's impacted by IT and other central functions that impact their tools and the way work happens. It certainly happens with life. So how much of that frustration you feel about the job was the commute in or sitting on Zoom all day, right? So there's lots of things that impact us. So failure points here to me is the biggest failure point is there's no single owner of the day-to-day experience of employees. Again, as you look back on that last slide, some of it's in IT, some of it's in HR, some of it's in the line leader, some of it's in the fact that we don't have enough employees on staff at this moment in time. Some of it is how things are shifting so quickly in the marketplace right now. And what was expected of me 2 weeks ago is different than what's expected today. So how do we solve for this biggest and most important one? To me, part of it's getting back to our roots as HR, right? More listening posts, more qualitative feel and assessment of the organization that might come from the old management by walk around, right? How much of our HR business partners are spending time talking with employees? Do they sense a different feel in how people are reacting to the workplace? They have a sense of what's happening. Do we have ways for employees to feed us this information more regularly? We could also do it through more systematic pulse surveys that are, short, detailed questions about specific aspects of work. It's probably going to take better integration across functions. So it's not just integrations across HR, but also across HR and finance and IT all together. And again, I think this is where employee involvement in solutions is probably going to lead to the greatest results in terms of impact. So if you thought all of that sounded really easy, what makes it really complicated to me is the overlay of this is it's also going to differ widely by the region that employees work in, potentially by job type, by level, by generation. So I think what adds to the complexity of the employee experience is it's not ubiquitous, that there are big differences in terms of how people experience work, potentially in our US offices relative to our offices in Brazil or China or India or Europe. Certainly might differ between our senior executive suite and those people on the shop floor. It might differ by our different generations in the workplace or lots of other individual factors. So again, the biggest takeaways to me that I've heard from this, really data, and more data being critical here, right? So more qualitative sentiment analysis, more management by walk around, observations from HR leaders and business leaders, more pulse surveys. I think it's the prioritization. Which jobs are we experiencing the biggest issues with in terms of the employee experience, or which aspects of the employee experience seem to be the biggest hotspots for us right now? I think getting more employee involvement in this, super important. More partnerships and collaborations across HR functions, across functions outside of HR and with line leaders, and really integrating with other factors that also impact employee engagement, right? So thinking about the broader mission purpose of the organization, our broader brand, really think about how to pull all these together to impact employee engagement. All right, so I'll leave it there, open it up for Q&A.
Great, thanks, Chris. So I think, given all we've been hearing about the employee experience, this framework is really helpful for us to think about the different kind of levels that you laid out and the different ways we can influence it. So a couple questions that have come in. I'll start with one that I actually had early in your presentation. You kind of started with this idea of, employees acting more like customers. They've always had expectations, but the difference now is that they have much more information about, what else is out there, right? And they're always making these comparisons to what they have. And in my mind, that really linked to another topic that I know you've studied quite a bit, which is employer branding. And, I think when we talk about branding, we often talk about, well, it's, we should both kind of, message to outside candidates, but also internally. But the reality is, I think we've often focused on the external much more than the internal. I know you made this point about reminding employees about what we're doing for them, but can you talk a little bit more about maybe where this intersects with that idea of employer branding, particularly with our internal employees?
Yeah, so I actually think that's a super important point, Brad, is more time than not when we think about employer brand, it's some external marketing piece to take out on the roadshow for college recruiting, or it's up on our website. And we forget that our internal employees need that reminder, right? And so I do think more internal comms, and again, this could be scheduled at different points throughout the year. It could be targeted towards different populations, but a good reminders around what does make us special. And maybe we're not great at everything, but here are the real strengths of working at this company, and really tailored that to what we're hearing from our employees in terms of what's most important for them. So it's some combination of, again, that groundwork to having spent time with employees to know what matters, and then reminding them what we do in those spaces.
Great. So another question that came in, and it goes to a point you kind of hit quite a bit at the end around this data, right? We really need data. The question is, how does this link to employee engagement surveys? We're already doing those. Should we continue doing those? I think to your point around engagement and employee experience being different, it seems like we should be using different measures for both, but I'm curious about your thinking on those and how they maybe connect.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I'd measure the employee experience. And again, this is where I keep seeing new consulting reports and new consulting ad sales promos coming out around there, how they're going to measure and assess the employee experience. To me, the employee experience really is the driver or one of the key drivers of employee engagement. But I think that means we need to measure employee engagement better, because in a lot of the past engagement surveys, I think what we used to see is some mix of things that might drive engagement with those measures of actual engagement. So when I think of engagement to me is really that emotional connection to the organization. And that can happen because I love my job. It could be because I love this company. It could be because I love my manager, in a healthy employee sense. And I really love working with my colleagues, right? So it's some combination of those four things. And so if we can get better measuring that, we can see where, employees are not feeling that same deep attachment, same positive commitment, connection to the organization. I think then we can dig in to figure out with the qualitative data, what part of the employee experience may be negatively impacting that. So what aspect of work is really creating the negative emotions? And so I think separating those two, super important in terms of data. I wouldn't mix the two for sure.
Yeah, that's an important point, because I think often we look at these engagement surveys, it's conflating those antecedents and engagement, right? So it's all kind of
outcomes.
Yeah, putting it all in one bucket.
Yeah.
So, I think you highlighted numerous kind of failure points and where companies can make investments. So if someone listening today is trying to think about, it's really great, where do I start? Do I really kind of nail down those episodic touch points? Do I really focus on the day-to-day experience of employees? Do I kind of try to make improvements in all three areas? Where would you advise that companies really take the first step here?
Yes. Some combination, and again, my consulting answer will always be, it depends. So to me, I think there's easy wins. And I think the easiest win is really in that top category. The episodic piece is really doing some quick work there in our COEs that own those, really around better communications of what we have, easier searching. That is not a high investment set of activities that might actually lead to culling some of those programs, getting rid of programs that don't have high usage. But I think advertising, marketing, branding, that stuff better, and reminding people that they exist and pushing information to them better, I think that can happen pretty easily. I think the other part to me then is really looking at starting with the engagement data and seeing, are there particular employee groups that are most at risk for leaving because of low engagement, low connection, low affiliation with the company, and then going in and doing some groundwork, some field work with them to say, try and get a sense from them as to why that is and what aspects of their employee experience is causing it. So I would probably, with limited resources, I wouldn't try and do this for every group. I'd look at those jobs that are both super critical to the organization, but those jobs where we also see lower than desired engagement, and really focus on them, and then do some intensive conversations, whether that's virtual through technology or focus groups or even one-on-one interviews, to get that qualitative data to really understand where their employee experience is off from what we want in terms of driving engagement, and then focus on those as my first interventions.
So a question just came in, how should companies train managers and leaders to deliver a compelling experience? And drawing on an industry that I know from your prior career, you're very familiar with, hospitality and restaurant, should we be taking those types of approaches as we think about employees as customers, to really think about how do we train managers to be creating a excellent experience for our employees? Are there models out there that we can leverage like that, or maybe in other places?
Yeah. Sorry. I mean, to me, you and I have been working on these working groups on managers related to performance management and to employee engagement for years. And I think the biggest takeaway I've had in the last 8 years is that every employee is different. And so really training employees or managers rather on how to have meaningful conversations with their employees and meet them where they are is where I'd spend the bulk of my time, really helping managers create a better experience. And, there's lots of things they can't fix, right? They might not have the resources to give you new computers every year, or solve the desk situation if we move to some hybrid environment where people have to come in and find their own workstation every day, right? But having a conversation, at least acknowledge it, talk through the frustrations, think about, individual workarounds, how collectively as a team we can do this better or figure things out. I think those are the kinds of behaviors that really across generations lead to a better experience. And that's, as much as I'd love to say that's easy, I don't think most managers are comfortable having those conversations. They're afraid to promise things. They're afraid to hear about problems. They're afraid to give some tough love. And so I just find that making them more comfortable having human conversations, I think, is going to be the biggest step. Helps them become better coaches, help their employees solve their own problems. I think that's what's going to create the better work experience on a day-to-day basis.
So I think we have time maybe for one more, Chris. I'm just curious on your thoughts of where and how should technology fit into this? It seems like there's parts of this, particularly at the episodic level, we can probably automate because we know employees are going to hit different life stages, or January comes along where everybody's making those New Year's resolutions around health and wellness, and we can push certain things out. Seems like at the day-to-day level, it's much more high touch. It's much more that manager, non-automated kind of approach. How do you see technology playing a part, or automation across different levels of this?
Yeah, I see automation having its biggest impact at the top two, certainly at the top one, where again, if we get better predictive analytics on when people might need these programs or who might need them, I think we can do a lot more push with chatbots and other AI-driven solutions. I think even in the middle, around career discussions, having AI prompting managers to have these conversations with employees, having AI prompting employees to seek different training opportunities given their profile, to have AI or other chatbots pushing information to them around career opportunities that are popping up that meet their profile or meet their career aspirations, short-term projects, long-term projects, job opportunities. I think we can do a lot more with AI in those spaces, but I do think that day-to-day is probably more individual tailored stuff that's going to come from human conversation. So I think the last one is both the biggest and hardest because it's a lot more personal in how people are experiencing that job.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thanks again, Chris, for sharing all of this with us today. I know, as you said, it's a work in progress, and you'll be continuing to work on this into the spring and next year. So I'm sure we'll have more kind of CAHRS programming around this, and certainly encouraging those that are interested in this to be on the lookout for those sessions. So would like to take a moment to close, thank all of our presenters today, Chris, our 3 Mylar research assistants, as well as Kevin Cox. Excellent presentations. I think they've given us great insight into leading in this very uncertain environment from very different perspectives, which I think has been wonderful. I'd also like to thank all of you for joining us today. I hope you find today's session valuable. We'll be sharing out recordings with you of this session. Certainly encourage you to share it with others in your organizations that may be interested. We'll be soon posting our calendar of events for the first half of next year for CAHRS. So please do visit our website regularly and keep an eye out for events that might be of interest to you and your team in the new year. Until then, I wish you a wonderful holiday season and a happy new year. And thanks again for joining us. Take care.